Hi, it's Kim, and I'm back for another week of 10-minute tips. Today's episode is going to be about relationship burnout. So get your coffee or your tea, sit back, and enjoy this episode. Hi, it's Kim, and I'm back for another week of 10-minute tips for your relationships. 10 minutes. So today's episode is about relationship burnout. Yes. I mean, I know we get burned out on our jobs, we get burned out being mommy and daddy, we get burned out, just in general. But today, I just kind of want to pinpoint and talk about some ways how we become burned out in our relationships. Yeah, it happens. So, the first thing I want to talk about is what is relationship burnout? So, relationship burnout is when we become emotionally, physically, and mentally exhausted. Yes, exhausted. Well, why? Because sometimes we have a long period of stress in a relationship that we are trying to make work. Yes, we're trying to make it work, but maybe it's not. It's also a dwindling down or a dwindling of interest. You're not so interested in that person anymore. You're not so interested in making the relationship work anymore. So remember when we talked about the four stages of relationships, and stage number two was power struggle. Yes, sometimes we can get burned out if we stay in that power struggle stage way too long. Way too long. How? How did we become burned out in our relationship? Well, some people say that, look, I've been working and working and trying to make this relationship work because we know that relationships take work, but I'm not getting any results. There's no change being made. And then, sometimes there's only one person who's working in the relationship, or one person is working harder than the other person in the relationship. And so sometimes you can just get burned out when one person's giving a lot of effort and the other one is not giving much effort at all. So that's another way that you can become burned out in your relationship. I was thinking too, that job that you just hate to go to, that job that you wake up in the morning, you're just like, oh, I don't want to be here. That's sometimes what it looks like when we're in a burned out relationship. Yes. So what do burned out relationships look like? Well, they look a little like people who are detached from each other. Sometimes you have very little interest in being intimate with that person, very little interest in sex with that person, spending time with that person. Sometimes resentfulness can creep up in that relationship, and overall negative outlook on that person that you're with or the relationship that you're in. That's sometimes how these relationships look. Yeah, they look pretty sad. And you do a whole lot of work and get very little result. So, what can we do? What can we do when our relationship starts to fizzle out? What can we do? We're thinking about leaving, we're thinking about, separating ourselves. But I want to see if we can do something to improve the relationship before we just check out. So what can we do? Well, if you are a spiritual person, the first thing you should do is pray. Yes. Ask God to step into your relationship. Get into your word. Find out what the word of God says that, you should do about your relationship. The other things that you can do are, I love this one. You can be the bigger person. Yeah. Sometimes we can be a little petty about some of the things that are going on in the relationship, and neither one of us wants to be the bigger person. Right. So that bigger person needs to be the one to initiate some things in the relationship. Yeah, I call that person the initiator, because you're going to initiate, having a conversation. Let's sit down and let's talk about it. Let's have a non confrontational conversation, a conversation that doesn't intimidate or there's no accusing going on in the conversation. Just talking about how we feel and what we can do in our relationship. And then we can also initiate physical contact. Sometimes when we have been in a relationship that's fizzling out, that's burning out, there's no physical contact. There's no hugs, there's no kisses on the cheek, there's no sexual activity going on, and we just become very distant from one another. So why don't you be the initiator? Why don't you say, hey, let's sit down, let's talk. Can I hold your hand while we talk? Be the initiator. And then also initiate doing something different, having fun, going somewhere different, exploring something different in the relationship. Sometimes our relationships can get burned out because we're doing what? The same thing all the time. And then also we can reminisce. Yes, I love to do this. Reminiscing, talking about the old times. Maybe, putting that marriage, wedding video in, or looking at your photo books, the children when they were young, and now they're growing up, and just different vacations that you went on and different activities that you had, just reminiscing on some things that you've done in the past when you were really happy. Yes. So we don't want to just go into that deep hole of burnout and stay there. I feel like we can, make some improvements. One other thing we can do is stop the negative patterns. Yes, it's apparent that when we are in a relationship that is on its way to burnout, that there are some negative patterns that we have set up. There's some negative patterns that we have fallen into. And so, we can stop those negative patterns. First of all, we can have a conversation about what those negative patterns are, and then we can start doing something different. We know that those negative patterns won't do anything but lead to a lot of tension and a lot of frustration in the relationship. One more thing that I want you to try, if all else fails, I want you to seek help. So many times people are ashamed to seek help, or they feel like their relationship has gone, too far, and there's no way that anyone could help. But seek help. So in seeking help, it could be a pastoral counselor. You can seek your pastor and his wife. They can counsel you and your spouse. Look, burnout happens. It does. Burnout happens. And it happens most times when we don't do one of two things. When we don't talk, when we don't communicate, when we don't spend time together. Yes, we have to do all those things. We said earlier that we had to work in the relationship, and all those things are work. We have to give and take. We have to share. We have to be open, and we have to be transparent with one another. One other thing, let me say this. You can get burned out on your job and bring all of that frustration home and get burned out in your relationship. So let's not bring that baggage home. Let's start learning how to leave that at the job. Not easy, but it's possible to do. So what is it going to take? Yes, we said it's going to take work. But there are some things that we're going to have to do. We're going to have to remotivate ourselves in the relationship. We're going to have to re-energize ourselves in the relationship. We're going to have to reattach ourselves to our spouse in the relationship. Renegotiate a whole different outlook on the relationship. These are my 10-minute tips. Please be safe